Sleep paralysis, an experience so terrifying that it leaves you paralyzed in fear, unable to move or speak, while a sense of dread creeps over you. Have you ever woken up in the middle of the night only to find yourself trapped in your own body, unable to move, breathe, or even scream? It's an eerie sensation that millions of people around the world have encountered, and tonight, we're diving deep into true stories shared by viewers who've lived through it. Our first story comes from a viewer named Sarah, who's here to share a terrifying encounter she had during a sleep paralysis episode that she'll never forget. Sarah recalls waking up in the middle of the night, completely paralyzed. She could feel her body, but it wouldn't respond. As her mind raced with panic, she realized she wasn't alone. Standing at the foot of her bed, there was a dark, shadowy figure. She could make out no features, just a silhouette cloaked in an unnatural darkness. But the most chilling part wasn't just its presence. No, what terrified her most was the feeling that this figure was watching her. Her heart raced as she tried to scream or move, but her body wouldn't cooperate. The figure stood motionless, staring into her soul, until she finally snapped out of the paralysis. The moment she could move again, it disappeared as if it was never there. Our next story comes from a viewer named John, who had a terrifying experience that involved an old woman during sleep paralysis. John was in the midst of a deep sleep when he suddenly woke up, but something wasn't right. He couldn't move. His eyes darted around the room, and that's when he saw her, a frail old woman standing at the side of his bed. At first, John thought it was just a trick of the mind, a dream-like vision, but as she slowly crept closer, he could feel her cold breath against his skin. She leaned down, her face coming inches from his, and whispered something he couldn't understand. It wasn't in any language he recognized, but the voice was cold and harsh. John tried to scream, but it was as though his voice was trapped inside him. The woman's figure faded into the darkness as John broke free from the paralysis. But he couldn't shake the chilling feeling that she was still there, somewhere in the room, watching him. Next, we have a story from Alex, who found himself in a terrifying battle of wills against an unseen force. Alex had always heard stories about sleep paralysis, but he never thought he would experience it himself. One night, he woke up, unable to move a muscle. As he lay there in complete silence, he felt a strange weight press down on his chest, as if something was sitting on him. The sensation was suffocating, and panic set in. Every breath was a struggle, and no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't escape the crushing weight. Then, through the corner of his eye, Alex saw something move. A dark shadow. It wasn't a figure. It was more like a shape, a fluid, shifting darkness that seemed to loom over him. It moved closer and closer, and he could feel its cold energy surrounding him. When he finally managed to break free from the paralysis, the weight lifted, but the shadow remained in his mind, following him for days. Here's a chilling story shared by Mark, who experienced something he still can't explain. This encounter wasn't just terrifying, it left him questioning everything he thought he knew about reality. Mark woke up in the middle of the night to find himself paralyzed. He couldn't move a muscle. His mind screamed for him to get up, but his body wouldn't respond. As his eyes adjusted to the darkness, he saw it. A tall, humanoid figure standing motionless in the corner of his room. It was taller than a normal person, and its outline was almost unnatural. It didn't have a face, but Mark could feel the presence of its gaze. The air in the room grew thick with tension, and Mark could feel his heartbeat thundering in his chest. It moved closer to him, its movements jerky and unnatural. As it reached the edge of his bed, it whispered something in a voice that wasn't human. The words made no sense, but they were filled with malice. The moment Mark broke free from the paralysis, the entity vanished into thin air. But even now, years later, he can still feel its presence in the dark corners of his room. Emily shares a story that is so frightening, it feels like something straight out of a horror movie. What she experienced during sleep paralysis still haunts her to this day. One night, Emily woke up in the middle of the night, only to find herself completely unable to move. Her eyes darted around the room, trying to figure out what was happening. That's when she noticed something moving beneath her bed. First, it was just a pair of glowing red eyes, but soon, the rest of the creature emerged. A large, hunched, grotesque beast, its claws scraping against the floor. The creature stared up at her, its breath heavy and ragged. Emily tried to scream, to move, but she was trapped. The creature crawled up towards the edge of the bed, its eyes never leaving hers. It whispered her name in a deep, guttural voice, and the room grew colder with each passing second. When Emily finally broke free from the paralysis, the creature was gone, but she couldn't shake the image of its glowing red eyes following her wherever she went. Sleep paralysis is a phenomenon that can be explained by science, but for many, it's a terrifying experience that feels far beyond the reach of logic. Whether it's shadowy figures, ghostly whispers, or terrifying creatures, these true stories from viewers show us that sometimes the mind and body can betray us in the most horrifying ways. Have you ever experienced sleep paralysis? Or do you have your own spine-chilling story to share? Leave your thoughts and stories in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more terrifying real-life encounters from people just like you.